Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining us for our daily English news edition. I'm Daniel Cook, your host, Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. The vice chairman of the Socialist Parliamentary Group has indicated support for the idea of early elections in Albania if the justice reform is not adopted. In Parliament today, Mr. Balla responded to the recent statements of the Socialist MP Pandeli Majko. He said that the party is ready to interrupt their governance and go to early elections in the event that the judicial reform gets blocked. After leaving the assembly, the former Prime Minister Sali Berisha was questioned by the media about his opinion on the early elections. He initially avoided giving a response, but he finally did make the following comment. There will be no early elections with Edi Rama. The people will need to find a different solution. They have all the rights and power to remove Edi Rama from office, said Mr. Berisha. For the fourth week in a row, the Democratic Party has boycotted the plenary session. They attended only at the very beginning of the assembly, long enough for Poloka and Berisha to repeat the democratic demands. The Democrats are boycotting the parliament until the majority implements the decriminalization law and establishes the National Bureau of Investigation. Basha responded from Washington today about the possibility of early elections if the justice reform is not adopted. He expressed his conviction that the country will get both the justice reform and free and honest elections. In this way, he said, the country will be able to legally punish those responsible for governing so badly over the last 3 years. According to the Democratic chairman, the first test that will reveal whether Rama really wants the justice reform is the adoption of the National Bureau of Investigation. He said, our stance on the Bureau has been clear since the beginning. We support the Venice opinion that the Bureau should be under the authority of the prosecution. This is also a test of the sincerity of the majority. Now is the time for the majority to prove whether it really wants the justice reform. The first test for Rama is the National Bureau of Investigation. The adoption of the constitutional and legal acts is the first thing that must be done in order to pave the way for a bureau that will fight corruption at the highest levels. On the second day of his stay in the U.S., the opposition leader held meetings with several congressmen and the director for the Balkans in the State Department. He was also invited to a special meeting of the National Security Council at the White House. The Congressman David Jolly expressed his support for the Democratic stance on the decriminalization law. He supported the removal of the criminals from Albanian politics and the holding of free and honest elections. From the USA, Mr. Basha reiterated his appeal to the Prime Minister for political dialogue in order to advance the justice reform based on the Venice recommendations. The majority has denied the Democratic request to take the MP Rakip Suli to the Constitutional Court. The Democrats are accusing Suli of unethically benefiting from the public funds. The decision was made after yesterday's meeting of the Socialist Parliamentary Group. They avoided debate on the issue and stuck to the ruling of the Council of Mandates. On their side, the Democrats argue that the refusal is unconstitutional. According to them, the content of their request for Suli is the same as the request for Kocho Kokodima, whom the Socialists agreed to send before the court last week. The former Prime Minister Sali Berisha made the claim that the left-wing MPs are defending Prime Minister Rama, covering up his theft. He spoke about the possibility of further protests against the government. I expected this, he said, because I knew that they would defend each other. The majority is stealing the Albanians' money and taking the power from the Constitutional Court. The people have the right to remove them from power, and they should rise up and respond to this criminal majority with civil disobedience, said Mr. Berisha. The General Director of Borders and Immigration Department was invited to be a guest last night on our program tonight, Il Vitare. He said that 3 points have been identified through which Syrian refugees are likely to pass, if they do in fact pass through Albania. These points are along the border of Greece, according to Mr. Merepeza. He commented, the department has identified 3 points in Gjirokastra, but no refugee camps have been seen as of yet. We have identified these points of high risk because of their close affinity to Greece. When refugees arrive at the borders, they have been known to set up camps within a day. No camps have been established yet, he said. The Border and Immigration Director also announced that 15 scanners are being installed in the border police stations in order to fingerprint all the refugees that will enter Albania. The Albanian ombudsman Igli Totozani also called into the studio and took part in the discussion. He expressed his discontent with the authorities because they have failed to release information on the situation so far. He said, "We have requested a plan of measures and the executive branch has prepared it. However, no information has been given out so far, which is hampering our constitutional responsibility to monitor the measures that are being taken. I am currently in Gjirokastra monitoring the situation because it's an issue of human rights. There are no camps available to welcome the refugees. The authorities need to tell us where the camps have been set up so that we can go and visit them," said the ombudsman. In a period of 1 year, the Health Insurance Fund has interrupted its contracts with 20 pharmacies because of abuse and fictitious prescriptions. A recent audit conducted by the fund in cooperation with the Anti-Corruption Unit revealed fraud and abuse in 36 pharmacies and 14 pharmaceutical warehouses. The evidence has already been sent to the prosecution. This was announced today by the director of the Health Insurance Fund during its annual report. Director Braho said, "The contracts with 20 pharmacies have been terminated because of violations. The documents for 36 pharmacies and 14 pharmaceutical warehouses have already been submitted to the prosecution. The financial damage from these amounts to around 68 million lek, some of which has been recovered," she said. The Minister of Health, Ilir Becai, also spoke at the annual report, highlighting the problem of phony prescriptions. According to him, the Health Insurance Fund was faced with a serious amount of corruption cases last year. He said, "There were some difficult problems with fictitious reimbursements of medicines last year. It was found out that some of the pharmacies making the reimbursement claims did not exist at all. We have analyzed the cause of this, and the responsibility for this corruption belongs to individuals, not companies. Our duty is to prevent such things from happening again, and I believe that the fund is making efforts to stop this kind of abuse," said Minister Becai. The chairwoman of the Electoral Commission held a meeting today with the stakeholders on the electoral reform. The opposition and the majority resumed their debate over the appointment of electoral commissioners. Chairwoman Luzi pointed out that the administrations of the past have always been problematic because of a high degree of politicization. She said that the adoption of the reform in a timely manner will bring higher standards to the next elections. The opposition members also spoke about the problem of commissioners with political affiliations. They agreed that a solution must be found for this issue. On their part, the socialist members said that commissioners should be appointed from outside the political field. According to the Democratic MP Oerd Budukbashi, the commissioners are not the problem. He says that the problem lies with the political parties trying to influence the process. The international expert Igor Galan also addressed the commission. According to him, it is too late to change the electoral code before the next elections. He said, "Do not intervene with the electoral code just 1 year before the elections, or you will not have time to finish. The important thing for now is to decide the direction that the electoral reform will go." Boycotts of the electoral administration have been a repeated problem in Albania. They have often delayed the calculation of election results. That's the end of our edition for this evening. Thanks again for watching, and please join us at the same time tomorrow for more news in English. Have a great night.